What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Mafia podcast, NBA edition. My name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, and I am here with my co host, the Fantasy Caveman. And today, our topic of discussion is going to be the NBA regular season. And what we're specifically going to do is go through some games that we're excited for, now that all the individual games have come out and we had some time and opportunity to kind of dive into everything. So, it's exciting. Once I really dove through the schedule, there's quite a few games that are really intriguing to me. Obviously, some seeding on the line and playoff implications. We got people fighting for that 8 seed and 9 seed to try to play their way into the playoffs. So, a lot of exciting things to talk about today. So, we'll dive right into it. So the first thing I'm going to bring up is opening night. The first two games, and this is Thursday, July 30th. The opening game is the Utah Jazz and New Orleans Pelicans. And then later that night at 9 p.m., Clippers and Lakers. I'm really excited to see that Clippers and Lakers game. That's my Western Conference Finals preview. And really, that's a toss-up for me. So I think this could set the standard really early on. Two really strong defensive teams. You have superstars in Kawhi and Paul George, LeBron, Anthony Davis, superstars everywhere. The Clippers, I think, are more built to make a deep playoff run because they are a really deep team. One of the things to track, though, and I know there's a lot of controversy around this right now, but Lou Williams is potentially not going to play this season. So that's something to monitor because he's a really important piece for them off the bench. So I'm interested. That's just, I think, a great opening night kickoff game. And I'll let you talk about the Jazz and Pelicans because I know how much you love your Pelicans.
Yes. Very quick. You brought up Lou Williams. Maybe not on as big of a scale, but Avery Bradley is not going to play for the Lakers either. I mean, not as big of a deal, but still something to watch there. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the Pelicans kicking this off again. As you know, I'm huge on the Pelicans. I said next year they're gonna make the Western Conference Finals next year. But they technically have the first game, like you said, against the Jazz, and that's gonna be a very interesting opening matchup. I think the NBA did this right here. I mean, everybody's talking about how's that chemistry going to be between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell with everything that happened there. The Jazz as a team, I like the Jazz as a team. For the rest of this season and going into the postseason. Then with the Pelicans, this is gonna kick off their chance. I mean, they gotta have an uphill battle. They have to fight off the Trailblazers and another team or two to try to get into this hunt. But that one, just based on the playoff implications for the playoff implications for the Pelicans, and then that chemistry between Gobert and Mitchell is that's what I'm looking forward to opening night.
Yeah, and I know my pick for the 8 seed in the West is the Trailblazers. And I mentioned to you before we started recording, I wouldn't mind seeing the Pelicans. I mean, they're definitely ahead of schedule if they make the playoffs. So especially Pelicans and Grizzlies. That's an interesting play-in matchup right there. So I also mentioned if Zion ends up becoming this superstar legend 20 years from now, it'd be kind of interesting to look back and see Zion versus LeBron in the first round of the playoffs. Not that I don't think the Pelicans would even take one game in that series, honestly. I think they would get swept out. I do.
Mark it. If it's the Pelicans versus the Lakers in the first round, the Pelicans take one game.
That's not that bold. I mean, I'd say if you said 2 games, I'd say, man, that's really bold. 1 game, I mean, yeah, maybe. I don't know. In a neutral site, though, I just think that the Lakers are too experienced. Their defense is too strong. I don't know, though. I mean, crazier things have happened.
They're old. Pelicans are young.
Old. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't deny they're much younger, the Pelicans. I'm gonna kick it over to second night. There's one matchup I'm a little interested in.
Mm-hmm.
One of the teams that I'm really intrigued by is the Spurs throughout all of this. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people counted them out just because when you look at their roster, it's very unimpressive. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're still very strong defensively as they are normally, but they're only half a game behind the Trailblazers, Pelicans, and Kings. So they just have to hop them, and then they'll play the Grizzlies. If it is the Grizzlies could potentially move out of this too if they went on a bad run. But the Spurs really do control their own destiny when you look at it. They play the Kings. They play the Grizzlies. They play a lot of the teams ahead of them. So
Yep.
on the second night of the season, the Spurs play the Kings. And I really think this could be a game that sets either one of these teams in the wrong direction. I think whoever
Yep.
loses this, even though technically, mathematically, they're still in it, that's just another tiebreaker that's not in their favor. So I think on the second night, you could see the Kings or Spurs essentially be eliminated. So, and the Spurs have that playoff record on the line. So I'm just interested to see how it shakes out from a team perspective. I don't think the Spurs are that impressive. I mean, they have DeRozan and Murray, who's probably a top 5 on-ball guard defender in the NBA. But besides that, I mean, their roster is very unimpressive. But I think from the second night, you could see a team essentially get eliminated, both statistically and just from a moral perspective. This is an important game for both teams to prove that they're serious contenders to make the playoffs.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, it's kind of amazing to think that the Spurs are even in this position at this point in the year. I mean, their roster is very underwhelming.
And one of the one last point that I forgot to bring up. I mean, the only reason they're in that position too is because of Greg Popovich.
Yeah.
I'd say he is. I don't want to say he's the greatest coach of all time, but he's in that conversation.
Oh,
Most
yes,
people
for
have
sure.
him at least in the top 5. So he's a
Yep.
top 5 head coach of all time. And without him, they probably wouldn't be in this situation. And that's one of the only reasons why, when you're in crunch time playoff basketball, there's no coach that I'd want more than Greg Popovich. So as much as I want to count the Spurs out, man, if they win 6 out of 8 games here, I think that would be enough for them to play the Grizzlies or whoever the 8 seed is, and have a chance to make it. And man, if you're talking a play-in game, Grizzlies versus Spurs, I'd probably take the Spurs
Ooh,
just based
yeah.
on coaching and their ability to Greg Popovich's ability to have his players ready to play. So
I totally, and like I said, and their playoff streaks on the line too, and that just from a fan perspective, and you don't see greatness like this. The run that the Spurs be able to be on. So from a game perspective, if they were to sneak into that A spot, I give them probably 0.01% chance to take a game versus the Lakers. But
yeah, I would too.
but just from like you said, from a historical perspective, it would be nice to see the Spurs do at least get a shot at that. Uh, the game I'm looking forward to on the second opening night is the Trailblazers versus the Grizzlies. Another one of these, the 8 seed battle, or at least the ninth seed battle in the Western Conference. I mean, just talk about that point guard matchup there for a second. You got Damian Lillard, who I think is easily obviously a top 5 point guard in basketball, and I think easily a top 10 player in the league. And then you got Ja Morant, who has ran away with the Rookie of the Year and has just had a sensational rookie year. And we touched a bit on this before, but the Grizzlies are, like the Pelicans, are way ahead of schedule. So if the Grizzlies were able to somehow sneak in there now, I don't give them a chance to take a game versus the Lakers, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about who gets this 8 seed, is who earns the right to get demolished by the Lakers.
Yeah.
Quickly. If I have I have to pick a team, if I was forced to bet all my money on who could take a series versus the Lakers, obviously would never happen, but probably would go with the Trailblazers simply because of their experience, led by Dame and CJ. Interesting with the Trailblazers, and I talked about this on our live last Friday, but Trevor Ariza of the Trailblazers is sitting out this restart, could be an interesting story to watch. I think he was a very underrated signing for the Trailblazers at near the end of the restart. So, and you also got, I think they still have Melo. Melo hasn't won anything in his whole career, so maybe you'll see the best version of Melo that we've seen in a long time. So,
Yeah,
that can make them a potential interesting factor to watch as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with the Trailblazers assessment too. If I was going to pick a team that could beat the Lakers, it would be the Trailblazers. And when you think about it, they might be pretty well equipped to beat the Lakers. When you think about who's going to stop Anthony Davis, Hassan Whiteside's a very good big man, especially defensively. Not the strongest offensive game, but I mean, if there's he's probably a top 5 defensive center in the league right now, I'd say. So, and then you have Nurkic, who's fully healthy, and he's the same thing. He's not a great skilled offensive big man, but he can defend. So I think those two would have the ability to slow down Anthony Davis. And then you have Damian Lillard, who he's the kind of player that can take over a series. If he went on a run where he was scoring 40 points a night, I mean, he could take over an entire series. So as much as I wouldn't bet on the Trailblazers beating the Lakers, I would say that they're the best candidate between the Grizzlies, Pelicans, Spurs, Kings, Suns, all of those teams. So another game that I'm excited for, it's actually on the third night. I didn't have many people, or I haven't seen many people talking about this matchup, but it's the 76ers and Pacers, and more just from a seeding perspective in the East. Right now, they're tied for the 5th seed. And the reason that's kind of a big deal is because the 76ers have really struggled against the Heat and actually have had decent success against the Celtics. They were 3-1 against the Celtics in the regular season, 1-3 against the Miami Heat. So, this is maybe determines who's moving on to the second round in this matchup. So, as much as I don't think the 76ers or Pacers are sexy teams per se, and I don't expect either one of them to make it far in the playoffs, the 76ers fans have been waiting for a playoff series win. So I know this is a big deal for them. But if they get matched up with the Miami Heat, I don't think they'd move past the Heat. I like the Heat's depth. I think their offensive game is better. Defensively, they're both pretty solid teams, so I'd give the edge to the Heat. So if they play the Celtics, I'd still give the edge to the Celtics. But they have proved that they play the Celtics tough. So Pacers, 76ers, second or third night. Lakers and Raptors, just on a side note, also play that night, and that was my finals pick. So we'll see how that one turns out. Could be a preview. I know a lot of people aren't as high on the Raptors as I am, but I like their team chemistry. I don't think that Kawhi was essential to their chemistry last year. From a talent perspective, obviously, Kawhi was essential, but this team just gels really well, plays strong defense, and I like their chances to at least make it to the Eastern Conference Final. So just an interesting matchup there.
Yeah, totally. I could definitely see that. Like you said, those are two teams that are basically going to be in the hunt for who's going to be runner-up to the Bucks in the Eastern Conference.
Ooh.
I mean, what am I supposed to say here? Speaking of that, on the third night, the team you just talked about, the Miami Heat, on the third night played the Denver Nuggets. And couple interesting things to watch there. Obviously, Nikola Jokic is currently recovering from his COVID diagnosis. So we'll see what kind of shape he's in come that time. With the Heat, I think, and they're my pick to be the biggest threat to the Bucks in the East. Only because you look back and they played the Bucks really tough the past couple past couple years in the regular season. I think not a lot of people remember that they got Andre Iguodala at the trade deadline. The Miami Heat did, and I think that's been a very underrated signing that I don't think enough people are talking about. Especially and with Denver, as you know, I think personally they're a tad overrated, but they still got a lot of young talent on that team. Jamal Murray is not a scrub. He's a very solid. I think he might be a tad bit overrated as a player, but he fits good for their system, and I'm also interested what kind of shape is Michael Porter Jr. going to be in after this playoff. I mean, he's been dealing with the back injury for a while now. So has this helped him, or we'll see how that looks. Also, I just think the storylines between both them make the Heat versus Nuggets the third night a very interesting matchup.
Yeah, I agree. And my top 3 teams would be the Heat, Raptors, and Bucks as well. So I think that I agree with you. I think the Heat are a very interesting team moving forward, not only because they play just really tough, and that's a lot of that you can attribute to Jimmy Butler. I've always loved Jimmy Butler and his attitude and the way he plays the game. And I know he's a very controversial player, but I like his style. He's just that hard-nosed, tough kind of guy. And that's the kind of leader that I would want for my organization. And you can just see it in the way that the Heat play. The Heat organization now plays like Jimmy Butler, which is a nice switch over from the Big 3 days where it was a little more superstar diva-ish. I love the way that the Heat play now, and I respect it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they went on a nice run. So a few other matchups we've kind of talked, and a lot of these are really seeding based. I mean, some of these set the tone for the playoffs, like I mentioned, the Clippers and Lakers. You never know if the Raptors and Lakers meet in the NBA Finals. The Bucks play a couple top-end teams. But, a few more just to look out for. August 3rd, the Grizzlies and Pelicans play one another. Once again, that has huge seeding implications. August 9th, the Spurs and Grizzlies. Like I said, the Spurs, they play everybody ahead of them. So if they go on a nice run, they have every opportunity in the world to at least play themselves into a playoff spot. So those are a few more. The last one that I want to mention, and then I'll kick it over to you to talk about a few, but it's actually the Nets and the Magic on August 11th, which might seem like a really strange one. But one of the things you and I haven't really talked about, and I haven't really seen NBA media cover it at all, but the Brooklyn Nets are only 1/2 of a game above the Orlando Magic. So theoretically, the Nets could fall into that 8 seed and have to play a play-in series, and they could fall out of the playoffs completely. A lot of people are talking about the Nets as if they're a lock to make it, they're good to go, but they're only half a game out from completely falling out of the playoff race. So this game is huge. I mean, if the Nets lose, the Magic could jump over them. The Nets fall into that 8 seed. Maybe they end up playing the Wizards for a play-in series. The Wizards win, and all of a sudden the Nets are knocked out. I think the Nets would beat the Wizards in a series. But, I mean, theoretically, I haven't heard anyone talk about the possibility that the Nets fall to the 8 seed. We're all saying, oh, it's between the Magic and the Wizards. Who's going to make it? But, I mean, it's actually possible, and it's not even far out of the realm of possibility. This one game could serve as a pre to the play-in game. So it's actually bigger than people realize. So that's August 11th. So those are the few games that I have. I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, that's like that's a good one. That one, I mean, I looked at that, but I'll even admit I haven't really given a lot of thought to the Nets not making it. And I think a lot of people, because when you hear about the Nets, all you hear about is the fact that Kyrie and KD are not going to play. So, I obviously if they were playing, even if one of them decided to come back, that could definitely make things a whole lot more interesting for the Nets. But one game that not really from a seeding perspective, but more for or for entertainment factor, is that August 2nd, one of those top end games for the Bucks that you mentioned. The Bucks play the Houston Rockets August 2nd.
You got to talk
Obviously,
about the Rockets at least once.
yes, I have to talk about the Rockets. My NBA Finals pick. Remember that. Bucks Rockets. This is the possible NBA Finals preview right here.
Oh gosh.
But obviously, if you follow the NBA, you know there's that storyline between James Harden and Giannis going back and forth. So that's be an interesting thing. And Milwaukee has actually had a lot of success guarding Harden the past couple seasons. Quick couple stats to bring up. He's averaged 28 points on 34.8% shooting in the Rockets' 3 losses to the Bucks over the past 2 seasons. Now, James Harden has came out and said all he did was just miss shots. But I know that's not the case. I love James Harden, but I know Milwaukee's defense is that legit. But that's going to be an interesting thing. Now, as far as the Bucks are concerned, this restart doesn't really. They can coast through it. They have a 6.5 game lead on the Raptors for first place. Obviously now with it being a neutral site, home court doesn't matter. So obviously for the Bucks, I mean, obviously they're probably gonna play their guys a little bit just to kind of kick some rust off and kind of get them warmed up. But the Bucks basically these final 8 games are pretty meaningless for them. I mean, unless they go out and lose all 8, and then the Raptors go ahead and win 7 of 8 games. I mean, hey, it's not mathematically impossible, but the odds are astronomical that the Bucks would fall out of the first seed in the East. Another game that I'm looking forward to, again talking about the Houston Rockets, is the Houston Rockets have. There it is. The Houston Rockets August 6th play the Los Angeles Lakers. August 6th. And this is important for me because I need the Rockets to back up my faith in them.
I hope they lose by 100 points.
I need them to back up my faith in them. Honestly, before the shutdown, the Houston Rockets appeared. It looked like their small ball lineup was wearing them out. They were having a lot of guys were having to play heavy minutes and seeming worn down. So I think in terms of if you want to talk about teams that benefited the most from this extended layoff and rest, you got to put the Houston Rockets up there simply from a rest perspective. They've been able to kind of, recharge and get some energy back. One last one that I want to talk about is August 14th, the LA Clippers versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's each of the teams' final games. Now, there's a good chance by then that the Clippers will already have had the 2 seed locked up, which means they're gonna rest. Obviously, they're gonna rest Kawhi and rest Paul George. But for the Thunder, you look at the standings right now. They're in that very jumbled mess between the 3 seed Nuggets and the 6 seed Rockets. There's only 2.5 games separating the 3 through 6. So that, from a seeding perspective, that could be a very key game for Oklahoma City. And we talk about teams that are kind of ahead of schedule, which you see that a lot this year. You look at a lot of teams. You look at the Grizzlies, especially out west. You look at the Grizzlies, You look at the Pelicans. You look at the Thunder. You look at those teams. All those teams are ahead of schedule, and I think to see how they perform down the stretch in a pressure, which is most likely going to be a pressure game for them. Might not be so much for the Clippers, but yeah, they're a sneaky team that I could see making some noise. I mean, this obviously they don't have the power to beat Clippers or Lakers, obviously, but Chris Paul hasn't won anything, and unfortunately, it's a shame because I love Chris Paul. I love the way he goes about playing the game. I think he's a great team player, and obviously it's not going to happen this year. But I would like to see Chris Paul try to have a shot at a championship before he hangs them up, which most likely probably isn't going to happen. I don't think he's going to be able to get to a team that will over the next couple years, but I think he has a real chance to make a lasting impact on this Thunder team.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what you were saying with the Western Conference, it is very jumbled, and that was one of the last points I wanted to bring up, so I'm glad that you segued into it. But yeah, the Nuggets right now are the 3 seed, and we were talking before we started recording. We'll have to see what happens with Jokic, who got diagnosed with COVID in Serbia. He should be ready, but should is kind of the emphasis there, so we'll see how that shakes out. We haven't seen a player that was diagnosed come back yet. So we'll see. It shouldn't really have an impact on it, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, the Nuggets are the 3 seed right now. Then you have the Jazz in the 4 seed who are only a game and a half behind them. And then you start to have a huge jumbled mess. You have the Thunder and Rockets who are tied for the 5 seed, and they're only 1 game behind the Jazz to move up to the 4 seed, or 2.5 to move all the way up to the 3 seed, which in 8 games really isn't much to make up. It's more than possible. And then kind of underrated, you also have the Mavericks, who we haven't mentioned once. So got to at least throw their name in there.
You want to talk for a minute about Luka? I know you love Luka.
I love Luka. Yeah, I mean Luka's the future of the NBA in my opinion. So yeah, I mean the Mavericks right now are sitting as the 7 seed. And they are only a game and a half behind the Thunder and Rockets, and only 2.5 behind the Jazz for the 4 seed. So you could see the Mavericks move all the way up to 4. So, and especially when you look at it, there's a lot of questions. The Utah Jazz, we don't know how that chemistry is going to shake out. The Thunder, they've been a nice story, but do they have the firepower to compete? The Rockets, I mean, I know you love the Rockets.
Houston Rockets.
Well, for me, actually, and I could see them this being an advantage or a disadvantage to them because they definitely were getting worn down by minutes, but they were also really starting to hit their stride. As much as I don't love small ball basketball, I mean, when you look at their record, they were much improved and they were really starting to go on a nice little streak before the break. So does that stop their momentum? It seemed like that chemistry with Westbrook and Harden, they were finally starting to gel. So, does that kind of halt and we see the Rockets struggle? I could see it going both ways. So I'm kind of on the fence there. As much as I don't, I think the Rockets are a talented team on paper, but I think for them, the X factor is their team chemistry. So we'll see how they come back together after this layoff. But there's a lot of, it's very jumbled. And, we're just talking seeding here. And realistically, it's going to be hard for anybody to beat the Lakers or Clippers. If I was going to pick a team, I know you have the Rockets. But, I mean, I personally, it depends with the Nuggets. I think defensively, the Nuggets could compete with them just with Jokic, and they're one of the better defensive teams in the league. And I know a lot of people say they're overrated, the Nuggets, but there's a reason that they put up wins. It's just because they're a boring team to watch. And I think we kind of covered the Eastern Conference in depth for the most part. We know the Bucks and Raptors are most likely going to finish 1 and 2. The Celtics are 3 games behind the Raptors, so it's possible that the Celtics could move up to the 2 seed. Then you have Miami with the 4 seed right now. They're only 2.5 games behind the Celtics. Then you have the Pacers and 76ers and the 5 and 6 seed. Right now they're tied, but the Pacers have the tiebreaker. And I already mentioned they end up playing, so that tiebreaker could be broken when they do play. Then you have the Nets and Magic 7 and 8, and I already mentioned the Nets only half a game above the Magic. Then you have the Wizards as the only non-East playoff team that were brought back, so they're 5.5 games behind the Magic. So they have a little bit of work to do. They only have to come within 4 games to force that playoff. So really only a game and a half behind making a run at the playoffs. And I don't think many people have faith in them. But as I mentioned before, if you put them up against the Magic, Bradley Beal could take over a 2-game series. So a lot of interesting things to track here as we approach, and we're about a month away from the NBA starting back up. So any final notes you want to make on any matchups and anything on the standings?
Yeah. Just a last quick note, like we already brought up how the battle for the final seed in the West is just all they're doing is setting themselves up to lose, and most likely a sweep to the Lakers, or maybe 5 if you're the Pelicans, and maybe you can
I
take
knew that was coming.
But it's like it's the same thing out east, like even less of a chance. Like what chance does anybody realistically, not lying to themselves, give the Magic or the Wizards or even the Nets if they slide down to the A spot, give them against the Bucks? I mean, it's just not that none of those teams have a chance to take a game versus Milwaukee. But yeah, I think we pretty much covered it. It's gonna be there's a lot of, I mean, as a whole, it's kind of obviously the whole thing is underwhelming and how it's finishing out. But at least we're getting some basketball, and at least we're gonna hopefully get some kind of resolution to the season here.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm looking forward to it. I think our next few series, as we get closer to the season, we'll start focusing more on individual. We'll actually be able to recap some weekly basketball games. We'll be
Yeah,
able to give you guys some playoff previews, talk you through the playoffs from a fantasy standpoint. You and I haven't really talked about it, but maybe we can start doing a little. We were doing some daily fantasy before that. That's really the only fantasy basketball that's going to be going on once the season comes back.
Yeah, as far as season long basketball goes, that's pretty much been an afterthought. But yeah, good point. Yeah, once the season ramps up, we can definitely we'll definitely look into diving into some daily fantasy and try. We don't know exactly how we're gonna roll that out yet, but stay tuned for some daily fantasy advice when basketball season kicks off again.
Yep, so we appreciate you guys watching. This has been another NBA edition of the Fantasy Mafia podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. We have lots of NBA, MLB, and NFL content going up there. We also have our website, which is live, thefantasymafia.com. Lots of content, usually a minimum of 3 articles a day, I would say, are going up right now. Even on the weekends, we had 3 that went up on, we're recording this on a Sunday. So make sure you check that out. And if you don't already, make sure to like the Fantasy Mafia on Facebook. So thank you guys, and we will see you next time.
Peace.